Howdy, Duck fans, and welcome back to Ducks Digest. This is our second video in a preview for the Oregon versus Stanford Cardinal game, and I am joined here with Max Torres. I'm Allie Osborne, and before we get started, I would like to plug my current project, my new story. I wrote my first story for Ducks Digest this week. It is a profile about the Australian sensation, Tom Snee. It was amazing being able to interview his former coach from Pro Kick Australia, Nathan Chapman, and it's just one of my favorite stories I've ever written. So please give it a check at ducksdigest.com. And Max, take it away. What are we expecting from the Oregon defense versus the Stanford offense?
Absolutely. I think that this Oregon defense is definitely coming off of a bit of a high right now. Anytime you force five turnovers, 5 interceptions in one game, certainly give you something to feel good about. But I mean, at the same time, I feel like the tone that we're getting from these players is that it's not good enough. Talking to Verone McKinley this week, he was a guy that he has that defense. He's the general as he goes by, and his play has certainly backed it up. He's a guy that almost knows what's happening before the ball even gets snapped. But I think that they're going to look to have a big game this week, especially with Kayvon Thibodeaux coming back. We can talk a little bit more about that later because I think that is going to have a huge impact on this game and just how the defense can try to elevate their level of play. But the Stanford offense, they're definitely turning around a little bit. After getting absolutely embarrassed to start the year, 24-7. They had Jack West as their quarterback, and they ended up making that switch to Tanner McKee, and they look like a different team now. 40 points in their next 2 games after that loss, especially really having their breakthrough, if you want to call it that, in this young season in Los Angeles at the Coliseum to defeat USC, which ultimately resulted in Clay Helton getting canned. So that's definitely something to follow, but they have some injuries on that side of the ball that I think we are definitely worth talking about. And they're going to be a good test, physically up front for this Oregon defense.
Well, first off, let's focus on Tanner McKee. Now, Tanner McKee, he's got a 67.6 pass rate. He is the only QB other than Anthony Brown to start all games without a pick. That's extremely impressive, especially if we're comparing him to Anthony Brown currently. He currently is 9-11 with 6 touchdowns in the red zone, and that's in itself fairly impressive for a guy who was put in basically as a substitute for someone doing not that great. And also something we didn't, which you just mentioned, which we didn't mention in the offensive video, is that win against USC. That win against USC was a statement win for Stanford. And if you're getting the other team's head coach fired, it probably says something about the way that you played the game. However, they also lost 35-24 versus UCLA most recently. And we know that UCLA, Chip Kelly, they're really pounding through. Their offensive line has looked amazing this season. But that should show with such a close game that Stanford is really here to play, and they're really here to attack this. As players to watch currently, I would say running back Nathaniel Pete. He has 27 yards on 13 carries versus UCLA. Impressive. We also have Elijah Higgins with 17 receptions for 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. Impressive as well. What we know about Stanford is that they are the run game. They are fast and they are quick. They've got a very, very aggressive run game. And I think that is something that Oregon really needs to look out for, especially with such a young defense, currently young and building back up with the return of some major players. Max, do you want to talk a little bit more about the ferocity that Stanford's offense can show and also how it was very much stopped against UCLA?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to get into there. Stanford, even though they've kind of had that same identity for a while, I feel like it wasn't really at the level that they wanted it to be at as far as an execution perspective goes, but it looks like they're kind of getting a little bit more towards that. The numbers aren't the best for them right now, just 4 games into the season, but with the Cardinal, it's when I think back and I think about them, it's those red zone trips where you knew what was coming. They were just going to run the ball at you and there was nothing you could do about it. And then if that didn't work, they were going to toss it up to these massive 6'4", 6'5" tight ends that are playing wide receiver, even though they should be playing tight end, just because they're basically these jumbo athletes. They have jumbo athletes like across the board, and then they also have a lot of speed that can help pick you apart, when they use it at the right time on sweeps, screen passes, what have you. But yeah, some of the names to know here. You already talked about McGee. He's looked really impressive. I was watching the film of their season so far, and he's a guy that's really confident with all of his decisions. He's also got some wheels, got a nice deep ball, and a really good command of that offense. This is his first college season, I believe, even though he's been a high school graduate for a little bit. He went on an LDS mission, played some top-tier high school football at Corona Centennial, so he comes from an excellent program, and he's got this offense heading in the right direction. Just from some numbers from that UCLA game, 19 for 32, 293 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think that, against the UCLA defense, which is looking pretty good. I haven't done, maybe as much study on them as I like to, but that matchup was it was awesome. It was definitely the best game in the Pac-12 last week. I feel like it lived up to that billing. And I love their run game is awesome. They have a fullback. They're one of the few teams in the Pac-12 or even in college football that still has a fullback, really traditional power football there. And I think that's part of the reason this matchup with Oregon is so attractive for so many people, whether you're on the West Coast or not.
I mean, there is a reason that the game will be at 3:30. It is a game that folks are going to be watching. It's a game folks are going to be tuning into. I hate to admit this. I'll be in Corvallis, so I'll be watching it on my phone. Don't kill me. But a lot of folks will be tuned into this game just for, number one, both teams having quick offenses, and just to see how Stanford's injured defense can go up against Oregon's young defense. And speaking of Oregon's defense, let's get into some stats real quick. Right now, Noah Sewell is leading the tackles for the season with 36 tackles, and the 2 runner-ups for that is Verone McKinley and Mikael Wright, both with 23 tackles each. Verone McKinley has 4 interceptions this season. What? I mean, I feel like he's the general, like Teddy Gallagher for the Chanticleers is the mayor. He is just someone who is powerful out there and really getting it. And could we talk about Noah Sewell for a minute? He went out the 4th quarter versus Arizona with kind of like what looked like a tweaked leg. He went right back. He was all right. But are we a little worried about him? Are we wondering what will he be a little more careful going into this game? Do we know?
Yeah. Just to clarify, what I saw there at Autzen last week and what we heard from the staff after the game, it looked like kind of a shoulder tweak. I mean, I was kind of seeing him getting that worked on a little bit by the trainer, but like you said, he did come back in, and Mario Cristobal said that he's good to go. I mean, that guy, he almost seems robotic at times just because he's always good to go. He's as reliable as they come. That dude is everywhere on the field. He's definitely the face of this defense, aside from Kayvon Thibodeaux, I would say. But I think it's very telling of this defense that we're seeing so many major playmakers emerging right now. And I think that, even though there's some depth that they're working on at the linebacker position after they lost Justin Flo and Drew Mathis. I mean, I think they've rebounded just about as well as you can at that position, especially when you're working in a guy like Jeff Bossa, who is a converted safety, and he's been doing pretty well in that transition. Keith Brown should be, a guy to watch on the linebacker core. But kind of what I wanted to say there, Allie, is that you see these guys emerging at all the other positions kind of right now. And it's, I think, going to help them have a more complete identity while some of those other guys kind of get up to speed. But they're making plays in their own right. That's no shot at them in any regard. And I think Mykael Wright is a guy that I'm so excited to see getting some bigger plays. He's a guy for those that don't maybe follow football super closely. You don't want to be hearing his name called too much, because that means that the guy that he's covering is getting the ball and then he's just making tackles. So that's not a good thing. But we did hear his name when he had a phenomenal interception last week. And man, the takeaways, they're coming. They're coming all the time. And the Ducks are leading the country in turnover margin at +12.
I mean, +12. That's all you really need to know when it comes to the Ducks defense currently. And speaking of the Ducks defense, it would be a shame to not mention Kayvon Thibodeaux. Let's talk about him. Let's talk about Kayvon Thibodeaux. He's got no limitations for this game. And that must sound scary as heck for Stanford right now. Can you take us a little bit into that, Max?
Absolutely. It's looking like he's going to be a full go. For those that didn't hear, he was on a bit of a pitch count last week against Arizona. Otton just was roaring like crazy when he went back out on that field.
Arizona called the timeout when he walked on that field. They didn't know what to do. Continue.
He was certainly a welcome sight for them in that last game, but just having him back at full speed, I think is going to be such a big injection of some energy into this team. A team that really has not been able to get any sort of pressure on the quarterback since he stepped off the field. You have your stray sack here and there, but I mean, most of the quarterbacks have had a lot of time to operate in the pocket, which doesn't really spell for success as a defense. So I think that they'll be able to play a lot more free with KT back in the lineup, hopefully collapsing that pocket, shaking McKee off his game. And, if they have to ultimately game plan for him, which I'm sure they are, it'll give an opportunity for some of these other guys to step up. Maybe Popo and Mavai can get some penetration on the interior. Brendan Dorlus is a guy that has moved more to the outside this season. He's a super, super athletic guy, and he's definitely flashed. DJ Johnson, it looks like his role is elevating on defense. We saw him play a lot of snaps on defense last.
Trevin Mae.
Trevin Mae is doing great.
Yeah, Mae, thank you. He got a sack with Zona last game, so it would be interesting to see him come back in. He is a beast. So that's to add. Sorry, continue your role.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, no, there's plenty of big names to be excited about. With KT's return, I think it's important to highlight, maybe some other guys on the Stanford offense that are going to kind of be tasked with helping slow him down. And I think one of the big names to know there is Walter Rouse, the left tackle for Stanford. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And thank you. And he's one of the more experienced guys for David Shaw and the Cardinal, and he's going to have his hands full with KT. But I think that some of the weapons that we want to have an eye on here, we were talking about some of those jumbo athletes. The guy that really kept popping for me on film was Bryson Tremaine. When you're facing these wide receivers, watching it, we hear about it. I think Verone McKinley was talking about it yesterday when we were asking, how do you kind of approach this matchup? These guys are so big and athletic. They're literally boxing people out to get these jump balls. Like you could tell against Vanderbilt, that was the picture that we have in our offensive players to watch. Tanner McKee just snaps the ball and just stares him down and just lobs it up. And it's like, it's exactly like what we've seen in the past. Like it looked like a snapshot of what we saw from Stanford in the past. So it's going to be really big for this Oregon defense to have guys like Triquez Bridges step up. He's the tallest cornerback on the team, 6'3", 190 pounds. So I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe gets, deployed to slow a guy like Tremaine down. They also have Elijah Higgins. He's another guy that has been emerging for Stanford. And, we have some more speed to talk about as well. I'd love to talk some more about Nathan Pete, but I want to get some of your thoughts as well, Allie.
On which ones?
Just on the offense. I feel like I was kind of going on a rant there. But I was just talking about their big receivers and how, that they're just kind of boxing people out and just, out muscling and being bigger than a lot of the guys they're facing.
Oh, true. We do have Stanford does have a lot of really big receivers, and specifically the guys who are wide receivers who are built like tight ends, like you've mentioned earlier. And I honestly think that the Stanford offensive line is going to be interesting to look out for, not the most threatening. Currently, I was trying to look up stats to get a little bit more insight into them, but it seems like they've got a lot of younger guys. They've got a lot of sophomores, a lot of juniors currently kind of mixed in there. And against a younger offensive line for Stanford against a younger defensive team for Oregon is really going to be kind of a battle of the younger players and kind of seeing which style and which style of bringing up younger players is really going to work out here. And it's going to be interesting to see a team like Oregon, who specifically defensively from the second and third quarter in the Arizona game were really kind of not doing so hot, minus the interceptions. They were giving up a lot of yards to Arizona for a while, and they were getting outplayed in some areas. So it's going to be interesting to see a younger defense like younger offense like Stanford, see how they kind of are able to work around that Oregon quickness that Tim DeRuyter has really built up with this defense with some young guys. Speaking of which, Max, let's dive a little deeper. Do you have a little bit more on the Stanford offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, the Stanford offensive line has been one of their signature groups for a long time. I know as a Niner fan, Joshua Garnett, I think he was a guy that came out of Stanford that the Niners drafted. It ultimately didn't work out, but they're quick. They're a quick bunch, and they'll hit you in the mouth. I know that one of the guys that looks like they're going to be without for this week, if my computer will cooperate with me, is guard Branson Bragg. So that's a key contributor that it looks like they're going to be without. So maybe that'll leave them a little bit more vulnerable. But to your point, Ali, talking about some of the younger battles, I think that it'll be cool to see how that development is coming along. Stanford, for the longest time under David Shaw, has kind of been an NFL factory, and we've seen that drop off a little bit in years past. But now we have Oregon come in with Mario Cristobal, and they're putting out first rounders now on a pretty regular basis. And I think we're really seeing that depth, coming along at a variety of positions. And we have really good pieces in place for the Ducks on both sides, but it's kind of interesting to think, do you have more confidence in the offense or the defense? Because there's so much positive things to take away from both sides of the ball.
Totally. And looking at it now, got a little bit more up. It seems like for Stanford, it's all sophomores and juniors as their offensive line, and specifically their depth chart lists sophomores as their backups. So this is a young Stanford O-line. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play. And let's move on, since this is the defensive video and we do occasionally look through our special teams. Let's talk about our 20 for 20 Camden Lewis. Very impressive given his past season was not as hot, but right now he's at 100% accuracy. And what are we expecting from this kicker?
Yeah, Camden's been off to a red hot start, like you said, Ali. I think it's a great turnaround for him after struggling last year, and we saw Henry Cattleman come in and he looked great. And that's why I think a lot of people were surprised when we headed into fall camp and ultimately the organizational chart got released to see Camden holding down that number one spot. But he spoke with the media just kind of about his journey back, that mental battle that kickers face. I mean, I feel like people don't give kickers enough credit. I mean, that might be the understatement of the century, but that is the ultimate mental battle when it's just you. I mean, in your story about Tom, you talk about how he was, going through isolation, not only being so far from home, but just on a day-to-day basis in practice. You have everybody practicing 11 on 11, 7 on 7, indies, whatever you want to call it. And, these specialists just have the small group, but Camden has been awesome so far. He was, I believe it was 2 for 2 last game against Arizona. The offense stalled out after Bennett Williams got that phenomenal interception to start the game off. In comes Camden. I believe he had a kick later in the game as well. That was big for Oregon early in the third quarter. I want to say, I'm looking at the scoring here. Let's see. Okay, it was. Okay, yeah, it was the beginning of the fourth quarter. That was big for them just to get some points on the board. That kind of had come when things were stalling out a little bit for Oregon. So having a guy that's as consistent as Camden is right now is certainly something that shouldn't be taken for granted.
Oh, absolutely not. And like we've said, there are some weapons on special teams right now. And like Snee, like Henry, and we're going to see a lot of really great stuff from them. And hopefully return yards won't be that big for the Cardinal for this game. Hopefully.
Yeah, that'll be an aspect to follow, a dimension of this game to follow. Maybe we'll see a big special teams play from Oregon. They've got some crazy skill talent lining up back there to receive kicks, whether it be Mikael Wright, Johnny Johnson got some opportunity there. Micah Pittman, Seven McGee is listed out there as a returner, I believe, on punt return. So
lucky number 7.
Yeah, we'll have to see if he can continue his strong start. He had that big play on that catch and run winding down the third quarter last week. But there's one more thing I kind of wanted to talk about here in the defensive preview, but we're focusing on Oregon's defense and the Stanford offense. It's late, folks. Hang in there with us. But the health of this Stanford running back room is definitely a big question mark right now. Austin Jones is one of the biggest names to be aware of here. I believe he's the main starter for them out there in Palo Alto. He's listed as questionable. Nathaniel Pete, he's been really good for the Cardinals so far this season, as you mentioned, Allie. But Casey Filkins, I can't remember if it's Filkins or if it's something else. Bear with me. Casey Filkins. Okay. The reason I was interested in him is because he was an Oregon guy. He's from Lake Oswego. So it's kind of cool to see, other people from the local area out here in Oregon, staying within the Pac-12. But I mean, he looked great on film. And when I was watching them earlier this year, he's definitely an explosive guy, listed at 5'11", 195. So how healthy is this Stanford backfield ultimately going to be? Because they have some playmakers there, but certainly you got to think if you're Oregon defensive coordinator, Tim DeRuyter, that's got to give you an advantage. And hopefully, you're feeling a little bit of confidence there if, they're not at full strength, as you would naturally assume.
And that for sure is going to be something that Tim DeRuyter is going to be looking at and going to be trying to exploiting with the Stanford offense. If you keep hitting them, they'll probably fall. And we've got some really, really, really tough players on the defense who will most likely be given these Stanford running backs some real good rough ups. I mean, we've seen the way that Noah Sewell tackles someone. It's not pretty, but it's gorgeous, and in the way of how savage it is. And so when you see how much physicality and how much aggression these defensive players have, it's gonna be a worry spot for Stanford, especially with their running backs being in a questionable position. Absolutely. Max, do we have any closing remarks for our second video, our defense video?
Yeah, I think a good point to kind of wrap on here. Like we were talking about with the Oregon offensive line facing a physical Stanford front, I think when you're evaluating the defense for Oregon and these just massive pass catchers that they're going to go up against, it's going to be a physical matchup on that end as well. I think this is going to be, a time when that experience against Ohio State in the non-conference schedule is going to come in handy. I think the Oregon scheduling is going to be advantageous, even though they got banged up. That experience that they had early in the season, it felt like a playoff caliber game. And they're going to be able to take those lessons that they learned all throughout the season. So even though, statistically, it might not have been the most pretty matchup for Oregon against the Ohio State wide receivers. I mean, who would it be a good matchup for? That's the best group in the country. I think that physicality and just that grit that they were able to have, it's going to come in handy, I believe, multiple times throughout this one. And, it's going to be a great game. I think this is going to be a close one, but, Oregon's got the talent. But we gotta see how things shake out on the farm come Saturday.
And they also played that Ohio State game. That is the only game that they have been judged behind in points. They were, I believe, plus 14 for betting against Ohio State. And they came back and they really shocked the nation with that win in the horseshoe. And that was without Kayvon Thibodeaux.
Now and Justin Flo.
And Justin Flo. And now they have Kayvon Thibodeaux. So it's gonna be interesting to see him come back, Mr. Cryptocurrency, come back and try to see if they can really shut down the Cardinal. So Max, go ahead, plug the socials, plug Ducks Digest. Let's wrap her up.
All right. Sounds good. You can find Allie and I on Twitter at those names on your screen, mTour Sports and Allie Osborne. You can also find Ducks Digest on basically all social media platforms, just at Ducks Digest, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We got some fire photos from our photographer, Scott Bolt, coming out on that Instagram page. So if you're a Duck fan, you don't want to be missing out there. Here on YouTube, Oregon Football, Max Torres, if you're tuned in. Really appreciate your support. Would really appreciate a subscription as well. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It just helps us do our thing. It's free and it helps us keep bringing Ducks content your way. It's been super fun doing all this. I'm super excited to go to this game. I'm going home, so it's a homecoming of sorts for me in the Bay Area as a reporter to cover the Ducks. So it's been a blast, covering this team so far this season, and we're looking to keep it rolling.
Oh, absolutely. And as Max said, you can find me at Allie Osborne on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find me at Central Oregon Daily News in Bend every day at 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. on ABC and CBS. And this is going to be a wild game. As I said, I'll be watching the Beavers. Don't hate me. But I will certainly be tuning into the Duck game and keeping up with everything and anything. And you can find me on Twitter, where I will be tweeting updates on the Ducks and the Beavers. Please follow Ducks Digest on Twitter, Instagram, and read our beautiful articles like mine on Tom Snee at ducksdigest.com. And again, shout out to Scott Bolt for our incredible photos. He's a awesome photographer. Could not shout him out enough. And with that, have a great night, Duck fans.